First, some words about the JJ Ugland Companies. We are most known as a shipping company, so I think you would call us a medium-sized shipping company with very long roots, established in 1930. And also we have a company, Nymo, being an offshore construction and engineering company. And with Nymo, we also invested in floating offshore wind technology, also starting to look at hydrogen. So we're looking at also the green area. When you look at the numbers, we had a total turnover in 2025 of 3.5 billion NOK, and we're around 800 employees. And you here see some of our vessels. And you see the main office of the shipping company on the picture to the left. And you also see part of Nymo, which are located in the same area. And to the right, you see the crane vessel Ugland, which is lifting a part of a module at the Nymo yard. And I mentioned that the company was established in 1930. So maybe it's not a surprise to you that we are a bit conservative. And when we look at cybersecurity and digital solutions, our approach is that we want to get the benefit of digital solutions, but we also want to broadly understand the risks involved. And one example is sky computing. I think we were quite early taking into use sky computing, but we lifted up to a decision to be made by our executive committee, and we asked the question, where is the data stored and where is the data processed? So I think that's also what for us is important, that one should not be afraid to ask questions. And we have the ICT department in the main office in Grimstad. So that's actually part of our company, that we are an integrated shipping company, like some old companies within shipping typically are. And it means that we have both ICT, we have finance, we have management, commercial, technical, everything in-house. And we think it's an advantage for collaboration across the departments. So then over to how do we work with cybersecurity? What is our approach? And as a shipping company, we are used to working with quality systems and certifications. And of course, as a shipping company doing ship management, we have to be ISM certified. And we have been ISM certified since it was established in the early 90s. And then during the 90s into the 2000s, we were very much involved in shuttle tanker, owning and managing shuttle tankers. And then we had the big oil companies as customers. And we saw that both we needed a tool to gradually improve our quality, but also we had good use for a tool to prove the quality to our main customers, the oil companies. So we decided over 20 years ago to become ISO certified according to the quality standard. And that has meant that the organization has become used to working with certification, used to working with gradual improvement, and we have taken more certificates, more standards as time has gone by. It means that we have a set of procedures. We have a set of procedures on board in the main shipboard manual, and we have a set of procedures for the management on land. And we have guidelines for all employees. So I think it's important to have clear standards, but also, of course, it's important to have procedures that's easy to understand. So that's also a challenge and something we face, that we have to make sure that these procedures do not become overwhelming, that they can be understood and can be adhered to. And we are used to working with experts within the field. Norma Cyber was founded some 8-9 years ago, so at least we were one of the members when Norma Cyber was founded, and has taken advice from Norma Cyber ever since. We're used to working with DNV. I've been working with DNV and been certified by DNV for more than 20 years. And we also work with other experts. And what we did fairly recently was that we asked DNV to make a gap analysis. How does our current systems and our way of working with ICT, how does it look in comparison with ISO 27001? And we had heard that ISO 27001 is quite demanding and elaborate. And we had a look at it before, and then we found that not so many companies were certified according to ISO 27001. But in the gap analysis, the conclusion was that yes, there was quite a lot of work to do, but still not so far away. And the advice we got from DNV was that it would be useful for us to be certified, and we decided we will do that. And that's something that we are now working on. So we are hopefully certified according to ISO 27001 in the middle of the year. And I think that's a quite important step within cyber security. For the fleet, we have no majority of vessels being bulk carriers. The bulk carriers are manned by a Filipino crew, and they have long periods at sea. We also have vessels, offshore vessels, crane vessel with a Norwegian crew. They don't stay so long at sea. All of them have in common that they like to have internet available as a welfare factor. But I think it's particularly important for the Filipino crew who stay aboard for a long time. And we have all along seen connectivity on board as an important welfare factor, and try to do something extra compared with what was maybe the typical standard. But in the past, with satellite communication being very expensive and with a narrow bandwidth, we saw that we couldn't offer that much, and the crew sometimes they short-circuited the onboard systems to get better access. Because that was a real cyber issue. Both took a lot of extra work for ICT department, but also a real cyber risk. So, of course, it's not according to procedure, but we have to accept that it happens sometime. And we think that a good way to counter that has been to gradually improve the internet connection as crew welfare. And particularly now with Starlink, which we have taken into use when that became usual, where we have a much better bandwidth for the same cost. We have a much better crew system, and we think that actually has a benefit not just for the crew welfare, which is important, but also for the cyber security on board. And in addition, we're working on segregating the networks on board. So we have an on-board network for the ship systems, and then we have a network for the crew welfare. I mentioned that shuttle tankers used to be a very important part of our business. And there's a picture of Vinland, which was a shuttle tanker which we owned and managed until 2019. And Vinland had basically two of everything. Two main engines, two propellers, two rudders, and duplicate of several systems. And the idea being that since it was operating very close to offshore installations, it should be possible for the ship to have one system to fail and still the ship to be safe. And that was a way of thinking that I think we have taken into our ICT operations, that we like to have redundancy in our ICT systems. So we have 2 server rooms. We still do quite a bit of on-premises computing. And then we have 2 server rooms with mirror from one server room to the other. We have multiple backup systems with immutable storage. So backup is very important for us as cybersecurity. And we actually have 2 fiber cables, one in each direction, going out of the office building. And quite a few years ago, we invested in a diesel generator so that we have backup electricity if the electricity from the grid goes down. Even if we put a lot of emphasis on systems, of course, the people in the end are the crucial part. And we think that training is essential, and we have been focusing on training for a very long time, both on board and onshore. And for my colleagues in the office, this would be a very familiar picture, since for very many years now, we have been part of the National Security Month every October, and all employees take part. So it's a micro-learning course, very useful, I would say, and stretching over the month of October. So hopefully it's into the head of all of us in the JJ Ugland Companies that we should first stop, then think, before we click. Still, we realize that nothing is certain, and cyber attacks can take many forms, and we need to develop procedures as time goes by. And some 12 years ago, we had a real eye-opener. We had a contract for a new building with a large sum going to Japan as installment of the new building contract. And our system is so that every payment is approved internally, but in this case, the person who was approving was subject to a spoofing attack. So he was asked to change the bank account, even change the bank, and make the payment to this new bank account. And actually there was information contained in this request that made it seem plausible. So he accepted the payment, and we found in the last minute that this was a fraud attempt. So then we put all resources into stopping this payment. And with very good help of Nordic Defense Club and their Japanese lawyer, actually, since this money was going to another bank in Japan, then the bank intended to receive the money. The Japanese lawyer managed to get the Japanese police to put a man outside the bank office. So in the morning when it opened, there was a policeman standing, going in and making sure the payment was not processed. So we were very thankful that we could stop the payment and no real harm was done. But of course we had to make new procedures, and we made them fairly elaborate to make sure that this cannot happen again. And the downside with the procedure being fairly elaborate is that it can be time consuming and sort of, why do we have to do this? But after having had this incident, and all people in the office, they know about the incident, and of course it was quite a close call. So it has thankfully not been difficult to get employees accepting to have this extra work to make sure that when it's payment to a new bank account, we have specific routines. I think actually when I talk to other companies that most companies now have routines being fairly like the ones we have. So some concluding remarks. As you hear, we've been concerned about cyber risk over many years. We are a company competing in a market, so there are limits to how much resources we can put into working on cyber risks, because we still have to make a profit. So we have to strike a balance between the risk we face and the resources we spend. And of course, that can be a question without a definitive answer. We see that we spend clearly more resources now than we did 10 years ago. It takes the time of more people. Also, we have now people designated. We have, for instance, a special information security coordinator working basically only with cybersecurity. But maybe in 5 years' time, we will do things slightly differently. So I think it's important that we are open to developing both procedures and the way we work over time. And when we look back, there has been a lot of changes. But some things I think we can see have not changed. So all along, we've been focused on having good systems with redundancy. We have a large focus on training. We need procedures. And we need to be open and look at gradual improvement. And that has basically been the case for the last 10 years. So I hope this has given you some insight into how we work with cybersecurity in the JJ Ugland Companies. And I say thank you for the attention.
Time for questions, please.
Thank you. Very well done, Halvor.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll be up there with you soon enough. But before we get there, one question for you about ISO 27001 verification. So have you done that for all of your organizations in the group, or have you scoped it down to some parts of the organization?
Yeah, very good question, because since this is a room focusing on shipping, I didn't say that we have a ICT department working on the whole JJ Ugland Companies, also the industry part. But in this case, we have been focusing ISO 27001 on the shipping side, and then we will take rest of the organization as a next step.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I would just like to ask, how important is it when you're selecting vendors for them to have the certification?
That's also a good question. I think if you ask about ISO 27001, we don't expect most of vendors to have it. So it's still not so common. And to be quite honest, we were a little bit unsure because there are quite a lot of resources going into it. But as a shipping company, the advice from DNV was that we might be faced with this NIS2 regulation from the European Union, being called a system critic company. I don't think we will be defined as that, but that was some part of advice we got from DNV. So we like it if our vendors have certification, but I think it's fair to say that we don't demand it.
You talked about balancing risk and reward. Is there any example of where you think cybersecurity is too much effort to be worthwhile? So we had one example in our Athens conference, an IT manager was very upset about a requirement under UR26 that the shipyard drawings from Japan had to be locked in some ridiculously complicated fingerprint password system, and he was very upset, and that's an example of too strong cybersecurity.
Not really, but since I've been mentioning this ISO 27001 procedure, which we see as being fairly resource demanding, and we had a look at it in the past, and then we did some checking and found out that at the time there were maybe 2 dozens of Norwegian companies being certified, so it was very rare. And then we said we will work with this in our mindset, but we will not be certified. And then we took it up again. We decided to be certified. If it was just cybersecurity, maybe we would not have chosen it. But there was one advantage in addition, and there's been a lot of talk about AI during the day, and we see that we need to have better organization of our data. We need to define what is confidential, what is internal, and what is public, because to really use AI, we have to let the AI system work with our data. And we use this ISO 27001 certification also as a categorization of data and preparation for AI, and that makes it in total as a worthwhile effort to make. It will be good in any case, but there is a big advantage in addition.
So you're one of the few people in the industry senior enough to be able to say, if you saw a cybersecurity rule which wasn't common sense, you could say, no, we're not going to follow this. Is that something you would ever imagine yourself doing? I guess obviously...
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think, as I mentioned, there is a downside with certification, that it can be very resource demanding. But this is how we have developed. On sort of micro level, I'm not sure if I have any good example. And then I think it was mentioned briefly in the panel concerning sustainability, this European Union Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which we also were preparing because we're facing, I think we felt it was maybe almost a bit much demanding, but that was for a long time seen as the route coming. But then the European Union itself has said that they make it simpler. And I think we have to say that they make it simpler to make the businesses be allowed to adjust the resources they spend on sustainability reporting, because sustainability is very important, but with both cybersecurity and sustainability, of course, it's important to find the balance.
I suggest that we move to the panel discussion on how we can achieve maturity with cybersecurity. Okay? So Halvor stays in the panel. Norma Cyber